Okay, we are live. Pumi and I are ready to take you into the burning platform this morning. We've got lots of interesting stuff to talk about. We have a special guest, Professor Thabo Legwaila, who is a tax ombudsman, and he will tell us about the rights of taxpayers. Also going to be joined in a short while by Mighti Jamie, who is a researcher, analyst, commentator, and no stranger to the burning platform.
It's Legwaila, like
Legwaila. Oh,
there
sorry.
you go. Well done, young man.
Did we spell it wrong, or
No, it's spelled correctly. It's the way you say it.
pronunciation is shitty? Sorry, Pums. Thank you for sorting that out. Legwaila. Very good. Very good.
Welcome.
All right. Well, we'll get to the prof in a second. There's lots of stuff to talk about this morning, not only in tax, but we're going to talk about some of the things that Jamie wants to talk about, possible cabinet reshuffles, as well as something we had last week with the Nigerian elections. We'll see how those turned out. But first, let us introduce our special guest for this morning. Prof, it's a great pleasure to have you here, and thank you for joining us in the studio this morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you very much, Gareth and Pumi, to have me here. I just heard you guys pride yourselves with mispronouncing my surname. It's Legwaila, but don't worry about it. It's difficult for many people. Legwaila, yes.
Legwaila. All right. Well, once we hear it, we'll get it right from there on, I promise. So, Prof, let's just start off because, tax has become such a burning issue in South Africa because I think we all feel like we don't mind paying a little bit of tax to be a part of society. Tax is an important part of what makes a country work. Everybody makes a contribution. There's some things that only the state can do, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in South Africa, a lot of people are upset about the tax situation. Whether they pay a little or a lot, to everybody, it's a lot of money that they earned and they have to hand over. But we worry because we see how it's misappropriated, and we see how, last week this time, we were talking about the Minister of Finance tabling his budget, and he said, oh no, they've brought in more money than they expected. Now that's our money as the citizens of South Africa, and we're hoping, Pumi, that it gets used for the right reasons. But I don't think a lot of us feel a lot of confidence in the system. So, Prof, what is the system for taxation in South Africa? How does it vary between South Africa and other countries in the world?
Yeah, that's an interesting one to start off with, Gareth. That is why tax is compulsory. It's not optional. And, we always say the unfortunate thing about tax is that, you cannot hold it back and say, I'm not happy with how government is using my money, therefore I'm not going to pay. You've got to pay anyway. You've got other avenues of dealing with raising your dissatisfaction or your satisfaction with how government uses money. I mean, if you think about it, if tax was optional, even people who are happy with how government uses the money would rather not pay, and that is common throughout the world. So our system works pretty much the same as many other, pretty much same as all other countries in the world. You've got compulsory a system of taxation. You pay the tax, government takes your money, and then government decides on how government is going to use the money. You touched on an important point about the Minister of Finance saying that we have collected more than we needed to. And I think that one of the things that I would applaud about that situation is that that talks to a lot about voluntary compliance by our taxpayers, and we like that. But then also, let's not forget that what the minister then did was that the minister then introduced measures of kind of bringing back to the taxpayers what he could. We know about the incentive that was brought up. It's got its own purpose, but the incentive for usage of renewable energy like solar, that's like government saying we're going to forego some taxes in order to allow this particular activity that we would like to happen. Secondly, where the minister says, okay, I understand that we have you owe taxes and you pay taxes, but I'm going to ease the burden a little bit by adjusting taxes for inflation. So I'm not going to continue taking more than I should. I will allow taxpayers some form of reprieve by way of adjusting taxes for inflation, which is a good thing. So we haven't seen this all the time. There were years that there was too much pressure on the minister to collect taxes and therefore did not do that what we call budget creep. So it's like a very good sweetener to paying taxes.
Well, we're going to run a poll as we do on Thursdays now and let people cast their own opinion out there. And we're interested to hear what people think, because everybody in South Africa is a taxpayer. It's not just income tax. We have corporate taxes, we have customs and duties, we have VAT, and everybody pays some part of their day to government. I mean, if you're really unlucky, you spend 4 to 5 months of the year working for government. And many people would say that doesn't sound very fair to them. And other people will say, no, this is absolutely fair. This is a form of redistribution of resources, which the country needs so desperately. So it depends on what point of the political spectrum you find yourself on. But I'm sure we have lots of questions from Jamie and Pumi as well. I'm going to let them have a chance. You're a tax ombud, though, and that is a very specific role. So tell us quickly, Prof, what that means.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. So our role in this entire tax system is to enhance the trust, enhance the confidence in the tax system, to improve compliance. So whilst there are very many different players in this, SARS being the biggest player which collects the taxes, SARS being entrusted with that role, but that role also comes with a lot of power to collect. The power to collect basically says that SARS should be able to collect from the good and the bad, those that would comply voluntarily, and those that would only comply when they are shown the keys to jail. So SARS needs those powers. One of the powers that I would talk about very easily is the third-party appointment, where if you owe SARS is able to go to your bank or to your employer to say, pay us from Gareth's bank account, or do not pay his salary next month, pay it to SARS because he owes SARS. So you need those powers. But you can understand that drastic as those powers are, they are only used in special circumstances where a taxpayer is really recalcitrant, doesn't want to pay. However, there needs to be a kind of like monitoring system or reference point where we are able to make sure that the SARS applies those powers correctly and only in the right circumstances and follows procedure. Now, we've got instances where, for whatever reason, procedures would not be followed properly. That's where our office comes in. Our office then comes as an avenue for taxpayers who are aggrieved, who find that the service that they receive from the SARS is not what they should receive. They are not treated the way they should be. That feel that the procedures or the service or the administrative elements are not properly adhered to. And then we go back to SARS and call them to order, basically recommend to them that they should follow the processes.
So you can be an ally to people who feel that they've been treated unjustly by the tax system, and by people who SARS owes money to, frankly, because a lot of us pay in advance, and then SARS holds onto our money for 2-3 years, and if we're lucky, we get it back eventually. But we can go to you for that kind of thing. We could say to you, they're treating us unfairly, and you will help us sort that out, right?
Absolutely. So you would, in order for us to not overreach, we require you to actually go to the SARS first. Let's say, for example, as you're saying, there's a refund due to you. We require you to go to the SARS first and say, please refund me my money. And then SARS, if SARS doesn't within the limited time or within the given time, you are able to then come to us and say, this is my problem. And then, this is one of the issues that we deal with quite a lot, where taxpayers are not refunded on time. And with systems like the VAT, I mean, I heard you mention various taxes that we are in the country, and I'm very impressed with that. But with systems like the VAT, we work on a refund system where you pay, and then if you are likely to overpay, and then you need to be refunded. And because our small businesses depend a lot on liquidity, if you're not refunded on time, that might lead to the demise of your business. So we help you with. We also make sure that you get paid interest on that. Sometimes you don't even know that you should be paid interest on the amount that is due. Like you say in your example, if SARS has held on to your money for 2 years, held on to 100,000 rand, 100,000 rands in 2 years from now, it's not 100,000 rands. So we need to ensure that you get your money back with interest. Yeah.
Someone's commenting your look right now for me. Someone's commenting on the way that you're looking at the prof.
I don't know what that means, but I think we were remiss in the starting of the show, Prof. I want to because we're not like all these other stations. So you're free. Yeah, we're not going to be judged by us, and I'm so glad that you actually decided to come and join us, because I think one of the things that South Africans are, Jamie. Okay, sorry about that. Can you not hear us? Is that what it is?
No, we
Jamie?
got you.
No, I thought I was muted.
Oh, no, you're not.
Okay. The screen says
Jamie
that.
arrives late and then he wants to touch things here in the studio, guys. He must also be called to order.
Welcome, Jamie. Good to see you again. Jamie will be climbing in here hook, line, and sinker in a second. But carry on, please.
Because I think the right now, South Africans have got such a lot of pent-up anger that is rightly or wrongly directed at a particular sphere of government. And that then results in us feeling like, because the one way that we interact a lot with the government is through taxation. And so there's definitely lots of calls of, why must I participate in this manner? Right. And I'm one of the people that were very angry actually with the minister talking about how record collections, because at a time when people's pockets are so pinched, not just by inflation, but by also a regime of kind of the interest rates going up, everything is so much. And for the goal of it, for the minister to stand up and say, we have collected more tax than ever before, is quite irritating, especially when you know that the way that the tax is used and that your money is being held on to. And I like you talking about a reasonable time. So what is that reasonable time that I can wait to hear back from SARS? Because they don't answer their phones. So even if you try and go back to them, they're not answering their phones. So it's a useless thing. So what's the reasonable time? How much time should I let lapse before I come to you to say, hey, these buggers haven't given me back my money?
Right. Thanks for me. I mean, reasonable time is not the right word, actually, if you go about it, because the taxes are governed by law, as I said before. So depending on what tax it is that you paid or you are due for a refund, and the processes that are involved in that particular tax, you might find that your refund should be paid in 45 days or should be paid within a shorter period. So let's use 45 days as an example. If you are due for a refund, it needs to be paid within 45 days. It doesn't get paid in 45 days. SARS requests you to provide more information, for example, your IRP5 or whatever, to verify. Remember that they need to be accurate to verify. You've got they've got a further 30 days, for example, to then refund you. If they don't, that is when you come to us in order to resolve that. But I need to alert you to what you talk about, people being upset with the minister, whatever the minister said. There's about 60 million people in the country, so we've got probably potentially 60 million different views about what the minister said last week. Now, the point there is there are very many different avenues of raising very many different things that we deal with in the country. And it has to be like that. it has to be like that in terms of which there are specialist areas. We are concerned with the procedural, service and administrative matters that you may have against the SARS. That's our role. We need to limit ourselves to that. Otherwise, we overreach. You find that we're going to duplicate attempts at resolving an issue. Like, for example, I would say to you, if your car breaks down, you don't take your car to the dentist, right? You take your car to wherever you go, to a mechanic to fix that. So what I'm saying is, you being concerned and worried about how the minister allocates the money, or the fact that we've received a lot of money, it's not a matter that should and would be dealt with by the by the Office of the Tax Ombudsman. For example, an example that I would give you is one of the things that I'm closest to, that I hear a lot and that I'm very sympathetic with, is people, for example, pensioners, telling you that I am old. I've been paying tax for 45 years. I should be absolved from paying tax going forward. I earn a little. I only receive about 70% of what I used to get. I am sick. I've got a lot of medical expenses. Please tell the minister not to tax me anymore. And I'm saying, whether I agree with that or not, unfortunately, I can't help you. You are able to go to the Ministry of Finance, to the National Treasury, and the National Treasury has a process in terms of which every year they receive comments from taxpayers in their legislative amendments. They consider that. They meet with the taxpayers. They meet with the with tax practitioners to get advice on how to change the tax system. Unfortunately, something like that, although I might be passionate about it, it's something totally outside of my ambit.
So just speaking of ambit then, right? So I understand if I don't get my refund, you're the person that I can come and talk to. What other areas can I come to complain to you about and expect some kind of assistance?
Yes. So as I said, there is the issues of procedure. Like, for example, you get a third-party appointment where your bank deducts your money and pays it over to SARS on SARS's instruction, but you have not received a letter from the SARS to say you owe tax. They need to follow the procedure.
Okay.
Secondly, you can come to us about issues of service. Like you correctly said. Sometimes you call SARS and your calls are not answered. The service that they are providing is not up to standard, if that is the case, and that you can complain about. And other administrative issues. We cannot deal with issues that are of a policy nature, like I said, with the pensioners, but also we cannot deal with issues that are subject to objection and appeal, or matters that are before the courts. We cannot deal with that. So, and that does not mean that there are no avenues to deal with that. I just want to emphasize that our role in the entire tax system, in the big scheme of things, is to help you with that. And that is why, Pumi, last year or the year before last, we started a campaign where we talk about taxpayers' rights and how much the taxpayers' rights matter. I believe in us helping taxpayers be aware of and access and exercise their rights, like the right to finality. Like, for example, if you complain, or if you object to the SARS, there needs to be a point where SARS deals with your matter and concludes it. You can't wait forever. I mean, secondly, one other right that is very important is the right to confidentiality. If you provide SARS with your information, and you a SARS employee cannot then go like, did you know how much Pumi earns? Pumi earns so much, and then they tell everybody how much you earn or how much you don't earn. So there are those fundamental rights that need to be, taxpayers need to be aware of and access and exercise. Yeah.
And what kind of recourse or kind of relief then do you offer taxpayers when they come to you? What kind of relief can they expect from you?
Absolutely. So the relief would differ from case to case. So if you come to us and say, SARS has not provided me with reasons why they came to a different amount to me. So you paid your 50,000 rands tax, and then SARS comes back to you and says, no, there's an amount due by you of an additional 20,000. You've got the right to go back to SARS and say, SARS, tell me why. How did you get to this amount, right? In that case, and SARS doesn't provide you with that, in that case, you can come to us and say, and tell us that, and then we are able to say to SARS, provide Phumi with the reasons why you've come up to this. And if, for example, the issue is that you disagree with SARS about that same amount, right? You're able to, and you tell SARS that, SARS, I did my calculations, they're different from your calculations. I should have only paid 48,000. I actually paid 50. You need to refund me. And SARS says, no, you should have paid 70. You're able to object. SARS cannot say, no, we don't want to hear you out. If they don't want to hear you out, you're able to come to us, and then we are able to say to SARS, have this discussion with Phumi, allow her to object, and if you feel that you don't have enough knowledge of your taxes for you to have a debate with the SARS on this, you've got a right to legal representation. And SARS cannot say, no, we're not going to talk to anybody about this, only you. No. We're able to say to SARS, allow Phumi to bring. Exactly.
Don't me, talk to my lawyer.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people. What last question?
Okay, just quickly, I want to throw in the poll so that people can start voting. And then I know you've got a question, and then Jamie's got some as well. But the poll is up. So we want you to vote in the poll, which you can vote on YouTube for. And here it is, the various options. And of course, this doesn't relate to the Tax Ombudsman, but to tax in general. Tax is A, theft. B, the cost of being part of society. C, unfair and penalizes certain people more than others. Or D, the fairest way to distribute resources. Go and vote in the poll. We will compare the results at the end of the show.
And also, when you're there voting,
you don't have E, all of the above, and F, none of the above.
Okay, fair enough.
Fair enough. Well, this is my last question about the way in which we are dealt with. So the customer service from SARS officials. Very many people, especially because a lot of my friends, small business owners, having issues with the stank attitude that one deals with from these officials who think like this is their uncle's house. Can I come and complain to you about that kind of stuff too?
Yeah, Phumi, I would like you to complain to the SARS first. I would like you to go to the SARS has an office called the CMO, Complaints Management Office, that deals with that. SARS is not. SARS does not want to ill-treat taxpayers. SARS understands that you are the biggest clients. You need to, like I said, we want to encourage voluntary compliance, and voluntary compliance is good for the country. You know why? Because if people comply voluntarily, we use less resources to collect the taxes. So we would employ fewer people to collect, as opposed to having huge audit teams because people don't comply voluntarily. So SARS is interested in that. SARS wants to hear that if there are those concerns about you being ill-treated by their and I think this needs to come out, this needs to be known, and SARS, I think, makes an effort to make taxpayers know that their service is good. They've got the going that says at your service. They want that. So your first port of call is to go to them. They would like to hear you. And if you are not heard, then you can come to us, because then we would be able to talk to them about them improving their service in that regard, if they have not improved it from you directly raising the complaint with them.
Okay, Jamie, your mic is on.
Well, I don't have any questions.
You're not muted.
You don't have any questions for the SARS?
No questions about house.
No, I think he's covered a lot of the ground. I think a lot of the questions that you guys had have been dealt with. I think the only thing I'd ask is what's the turnaround time on a dispute being resolved once it's lodged with your office?
Yeah, we work on a 15 working day turnaround, and I must say that we pride ourselves in the fact that we actually resolve most like a high percentage of our complaints during that time. Obviously, there would be challenges, for example, where we require information, be it from the SARS or the taxpayer, and there's delays with that information being provided to us. That tends to cause some delays. But also, Jamie, adding on to what follows from your question would be, then when we have received these complaints and we resolve them, does SARS actually listen? And if they do, how much do they listen? One of the biggest success stories of our office and the interaction between our office and SARS is that SARS implements about 98% of our recommendations.
Wow.
98%.
Wow.
I mean, that is more than distinction, right? I mean,
that's fantastic.
More than the pass rate.
Yeah. So with the 98% and the remaining 2, somebody would ask what happens to them. The remaining 2, they need to justify to us as to why they don't implement, and they do that. So there's a variety of reasons why they would not implement, but they need to explain that to us, and they actually do. So I think that in the end, that kind of like shows how much impact or how they hold us, how they understand what they do, the quality of the work that we do actually as well, assisting taxpayers at that rate. Yeah.
Wow.
So I have a
that's impressive.
Because Jamie may be out of questions, Prof, but I want to know, because our SARS Commissioner, Edward Kieswetter, said the other day, it may even have been towards the end of last year, that South Africans should know that a tax revolt is a very bad idea. And while many South Africans are compliant, and he hopes South Africans will continue to be compliant, he's in a little bit of an awkward position there. And I mean, again, this doesn't relate to your office of Tax Ombudsman, because it's clear to me that you guys are our allies if we have an issue with SARS, and that there are rights that a taxpayer is entitled to. But ultimately, I think the SARS commissioner is in a difficult position because he knows that people are furious at the moment with wasteful expenditure by the government, by all kinds of things that are going on, nefarious and dodgy things that are going on, once our taxes have been taken in and distributed by the financial ministry. I think he's in a difficult position. He's trying to convince us that you have to pay your taxes and you should abide by the law and all of that stuff. But the average South African is steadily tending towards less and less respect and admiration for the law. And I think this is a very hard balance. There are countries where we have seen tax revolts. Income tax, by the way, I was talking to an American the other day. Income tax was only something brought in America in about the 1920s. Before that, income tax wasn't really a thing. And many people say that in South Africa, very poor people shouldn't be taxed at all. Or in South Africa, that it is unfair that people are taxed at different levels because we all have to contribute to society. What do you think the ultimate outcome of this is, and how much room is there in South Africa for debate around these things? Because it seems to me that we can debate all kinds of policy. In society, we can talk about this and that, and we can have arguments about how social welfare is done and how health is conducted and how education is. But it doesn't seem that the politicians are ever too keen for us to have discussions around a tax system.
Yeah. So a tax system, once again, when you talk about a tax revolt, it is, we know that any form of revolt would result in chaos, firstly, whether it achieves the purpose or not. But I am a big fan of people using the right avenues to correct the particular wrongs. So, for example, for me, and I'll just use 2 casual examples. For me, if money is being embezzled and money is being misused, why would the first port of call not be to get the person that misuses the money or steals the money arrested. That's the most direct result of misappropriating money. Get them arrested. Now, if you feel that the government is not doing enough to bring the people that are in the wrong to book, you've got elections to correct that. There are some people that are happy with government. There are people that might not be happy with government. And a democratic society or a democratic system allows us to go to the polls and express that. I don't think that the tax system is the right way to correct things that we are not happy with, for example, roads, education, electricity, the police, etc. I think that we need to be direct about that. There are very many avenues that we have to correct the particular things. For example, the Department of Transport, or is it roads, has the responsibility to ensure that our roads are in proper order. If they don't, then you need to go through the avenues of that department to complain. The tax system, in all of this, the tax system hasn't done anything wrong. I haven't heard anybody say that the SARS or the tax system is wrong in this way. You could say in what you just said earlier, Gareth, to say that people are complaining that the poor people should not be taxed. That is something that the tax system knows. And that is why our tax system is progressive. Progressive in that the lower you earn, there are people that there's a level below, which I think is about 100,000 right now. If you earn about 100,000 rands or less, you don't pay tax. That is in recognition of the fact that
you don't pay income tax.
We don't pay income tax. Do you understand? You don't, if the progressivity, we try to also include it in other systems like the VAT, in terms of which we say that certain goods are exempt. You don't pay tax when you're buying certain basic goods. That is just to say we want to alleviate the tax burden on, just to make sure that the people who are the poorest, who can just only afford the basics, do not pay tax. However, we will, and it's progressive like that. So if there are people that are able to buy expensive German vehicles, etc., and people who are able to buy expensive alcohol, whiskeys, and all that, we would put excise on that at a very high rate. We would, for example, put carbon tax on those vehicles, and obviously you also pay tax, VAT on that. So the progressivity is pretty much everywhere in our tax system. So the tax system is not oblivious of those requests or logical demands that the poor not be more disadvantaged by the tax system.
Which, look, you talk about progressive. I know in 2018, 2019, I think, South Africa became one of very few countries in the world that doesn't tax sanitary products, right? Because like a tax on only the women folk because they bleed and just that, there was quite a big kind of push to take away the tax from sanitary products, and for the government to say, okay, we hear you, and allow that, I think does talk to how progressive our tax regime is.
Well, I mean, where I also think tax is progressive is they're constantly coming up with new taxes. I mean, anywhere government can find a way to, no, they do. And they've tried to find a way to tack on a tax to just about everything. I mean, we know we're already paying a huge amount of duties on fuel, for example, and that means that everything goes up as a result of fuel going up. We know that customs and excise, where if I order something from overseas, I end up paying more to the government for having ordered that than I do to the person who's actually supplying me with the goods. So it's become unfeasible for me to do that. And I think that while they can justify in all sorts of ways that they're trying to protect local industry or whatever, I don't know that that's true. I think that they're just on the take. And I think government, anywhere in the world, governments are trying their best to find new ways and innovative ways of getting money out of their citizens.
Very true, to a very large extent. And like you say, there is very many different ways of, you're saying, justifying it or explaining it.
Yeah.
Like you yourself mentioned the reason why government might want to tax you more when you're importing goods, because we want to protect the local guys. And the local guys would say, if you allow our people to import, then we're not able to make money out of what we produce as proudly South Africans. So there's those many things. Like, for example, government would introduce the sugar tax. You know the sugar tax, right? The money
Yes.
that you pay extra. Yeah. The point being, look, we're trying to get people to live healthy, but at the same time, the consumption of sugar costs government a lot extra. Therefore, we need to collect that more in order to handle or deal with the negative externalities that come with the consumption of sugar. Whether it's the right thing or not, what government does is gives you an avenue to contact the National Treasury and say, I, Gareth, do not agree with this tax. I think it should be adjusted. And they listen to that and consider and make a decision, an informed decision, based on what would have been submitted.
But Prof, will they listen? It's fine that they've got these. I mean, Pumi and I both know that we could sit here and wax lyrical every day about all the things we think are unfair or fair and make suggestions. But most of the time, these things just get thrown in the rubbish bin, don't they?
They don't necessarily get thrown in the rubbish bin. What you would think about, Gareth, is that there are two competing views. There are two competing, or in most instances, more than two competing views, where somebody says, the Department of Health says, you know, there is obesity in this country costs us a lot. Or they say alcohol consumption or alcohol-related illnesses or alcohol-induced crimes put pressure on the health system. And therefore, we need more money. And then one says, okay, let's increase tax on alcohol so that it directly or indirectly fills that gap from that.
But
Now,
the obvious argument against this is the idea of a carbon tax. And this is not a uniquely South African thing. This is happening all over the world, where they're going to charge you more for a gas guzzling car, or they're going to attach carbon credits or debits to every person, depending on how far they travel, whether you fly, whether you use this means of transport or another. And that money does not directly go to fighting our carbon emissions in any which. It just goes into the big pot that government will then use for all their other purposes. So it doesn't directly go to, I mean, like the sugar tax doesn't go directly to the health department, obviously. So these things can end up in the tenders of, some cousin of some minister, because they're busy supplying things that are never supplied, and they can go and buy themselves a bottle of Johnny Blue afterwards without having to worry about the taxation on it.
But Gareth Mapil, how do you know whether a particular 100 Rand or 1,000 Rand that you contributed to carbon tax is gonna go there or not? I think that the idea of ring fencing is the idea of ring fencing. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, because it is for the expenditure or the expenditure part of government to actually look at where the money is needed the most and to make that adjustment. Because let's say, and things change every year. You don't know whether our education is going to require more when we have collected a lot on carbon tax, and then we decide the most prudent thing to do is to put it into education. I just think that that volition needs to be put on a trusted government in order to decide where it's best to spend.
And I think that's the issue, right? And I know we've spent quite an inordinate amount of time talking about the issue of tax, but I think that's the fulcrum on which it turns. I think for a lot of South Africans is the trusted government, is we have lost trust.
Yeah, and that's a separate issue. That's not the Tax Ombudsman's fault.
It's not.
His fault. But I do want to bring in Jamie. He's got a bunch of other things here. And Prof, feel free to join in here on things that are not related to tax. But Jamie's coming with a couple.
We won't judge you.
No, not at all. So Jamie, first of all, we've heard a lot about these cabinet reshuffles. Is it finally going to happen? Is the president finally going to actually put his money where his mouth is, or in the sofa, or wherever? I mean, what's the story here?
Well, it looks as if there are going to be some cabinet reshuffles happening within the next 7 days. The days keep shifting, but we saw Kotongwana getting sworn in as a member of parliament, which opens up a space for someone else to come in from outside, because you're only allowed to have 2 cabinet appointments which come from outside the National Assembly. So what you've seen is rearranging strategically of various MP slots so that the president can have some room. We saw a couple of people being sworn in earlier in the year, so that Paul Mashatile, for instance, can take up the vice presidency position. We'll see what happens with the Ministry of Electricity, which I think is one of the ones people will be looking out for. People are saying that Sputla might be the person who comes in. He was the premier of Tshwane,
No, he was the mayor.
of Tshwane, and people are saying, well, if he comes in, is he going to be able to deliver everything that he can? Because he also left Tshwane under a shadow of controversy. If you recall, there were protests and people in Soshanguve and several other areas said that they were not happy with Sputla. So that's one of the things that everyone will be looking at. And the other question fundamentally is, what can you do if your benches don't have the necessary technical skills to resuscitate the cabinet? Because, I mean, people will say, the Minister of Police has not done a good job. They'll say the Minister of Education has not done a good job. We know Fikile Mbalula is leaving, but many people feel that he didn't do a good job, with rail and roads. And you could go down a list. Some people are not happy with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. People are not happy with the small business minister, Stella Ndabeni Abrahams.
Jamie, I think you might be better off telling us who people are happy with.
Well,
maybe you'll come up with none.
Publications do grade ministers, and most of them score at an E or worse level. So it's not a strong pool of applicants that he is working with in the opinion of the media. Which does rate these things. So, I mean, Mail and Guardian, I think, has done annual,
which they haven't actually in the past, I think 2 years, they haven't. This is Cyril Ramaphosa gets a free pass from many media houses because they haven't.
I think they may not have done one last year, but the previous year they definitely did
so
one.
It's interesting that he does get this free pass, but everybody who listens to the show knows Kevin on our first show said there's going to be imminently a cabinet reshuffle. We're still not seeing a cabinet reshuffle, and the date keeps changing.
Are there any ministers that you or Jamie think have done a good job? And perhaps even the Prof. I don't know how, whether he's allowed to deliver comment on these kinds of things. But Prof, if you want to, you're welcome to join in. But Jamie, is there a minister who you think has done a very good job?
I'm very skeptical about the government performance of all cabinets across Africa. So I'm the wrong person to ask, because I don't really I don't have anybody I wake up in the morning saying, thank God this person is in the cabinet.
Who would be your dream? I asked this the other day. If you could advise the president on his cabinet reshuffle, and you could pick from anyone across all parties, across every single member of parliament, who would be your dream cabinet?
Okay, so I think I've thought about education a bit. I think I would actually try to get the VC of WITS to become the Minister of Basic Education, because he has an extensive research background in maths, in physics, and that's one of our weakest areas. And he has competence in actually running an institution with thousands of pupils, so he understands some of the dynamics. And having come from a Black background,
is that Prof Zeblon Vilakazi?
Zeblon Vilakazi. So he would be somebody I would consider for that particular kind of a job. And then if I were to appoint a minister of healthcare, okay, the alternative would be to get someone who's been running either Curo or the AdvTech schools, because they've I think the AdvTech, they say that they don't actually have a screen for who they choose to come into the school. So there's no entrance test, but they've been able to get consistently 100% matric pass rate, but also close to 100% bachelor's pass rate.
Yes, the entrance test is what your parents can afford, including all of the extracurricular. The number of kids who have all sorts of extracurricular help.
But I mean, what you were saying is that
they can afford, the parents can afford it.
We take any IQ, so basically, if you're going to the basic education system, you're dealing with a variety of challenges, but you want a teacher or an administrator who says, I don't care what the kid scored in their last test. I can get them to the finish line with a quality pass. So there are obviously challenges between dealing with public education versus private education, where the resources are significantly more. But we spend, I think, what is the number for our basic education? 200 and something, 295 billion a year on basic education. So we're spending a lot of money compared to the other side of countries, but we're not getting value for that money. So I would consider those two. And then in healthcare, I would go to either Bara or some of the Cape Town hospitals and pick whoever is the manager of that hospital, who, if they have good credentials, and put them in the ministry. We've got a problem where we've got too many cadres who are either in Tanzania or wherever, who are being given these very technical portfolios, and they don't have the managerial expertise to understand what is the basic unit of and function of my ministry and how do I keep it running. If you go to a police station right now, most of them, you can see that there's a problem with policing. You don't have to go far. Just in the police station, you can see there's nothing here that is going to come out. And if you go to a clinic, it's the same. From the long queues, the poor quality of service, you can just tell that these are people who are not working with their basic unit of function. So that's why I'm nonplussed. I would try to get technical people and try to find, for instance, in the policing, I would need to get somebody who's done detective work, somebody who's done field work, and somebody who understands the
Jamie,
nexus of the system.
all
But
of
I'm
this
not-
is good, but we're
I'm not the
dealing with
guy,
it.
so I can't
Yeah,
do
I
it.
know. I wish. I
No,
wish
but
from your
it's
mouth, from your mouth
I
to
mean-
Cyril's ears. But Pumi, we know we're dealing with it with a party who doesn't believe in merit. They believe in
But you
credit.
know, I even worse, I think, and nobody, this is my unpopular opinion of the moment, is it really doesn't matter if Cyril Ramaphosa does actually get it together to reshuffle his cabinet. Because Cyril Ramaphosa, what we are dealing with here is we're dealing with a president who's gearing himself up as a dictator. He has consolidated into his office so many extra governmental task teams, task force,
Yeah.
and all of those people report to the office of the president. And so what he's done is he's consolidated into his office all of the things that actually should be sitting in parliament, because all of these people that he brings in, whether it's a chief red ribbon cutter or whether it is a minister of electricity or whatever else he's putting in, do not have to go and account in parliament for the things that they do or the things that they say. And Cyril Ramaphosa is not accounting. He doesn't even talk to the media.
I agree with you that there's been a concentration of power in the president, and I think it's been an attempt by him to bypass the failures of his own cabinet
To
and his
be a
own
dictator.
bureaucracy. But I mean, the other side of that equation is that it's not leading to change, right? The task teams, all of that concentration has, if not from a democratic liberal theory tradition, if he was producing results, some people would be okay with that. They'd be saying, okay, he's done this super ministry within the presidency, but now I can see A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But the trick side of the challenge for him is it hasn't actually led to any change. So it comes with
Any
none
change
of the
that
benefits.
you are happy with or that you can see. And if there's anything, that is one concession that, a couple of days ago, there are two things that came out. So his weekly letter that he writes from the desk of the president. And the second one, the shocking one this week, was about the grey listing of South Africa being an opportunity for South Africa's system to recalibrate and get things right. What an expensive lesson we're learning.
It's like saying obesity is an opportunity to exercise.
But the second thing, which I think I don't think enough people picked up on this, right? Is his second thing was really his statement around the derater situation and what's happening at Eskom. And the words that he used, which for me really did turn on a light, is the fact that you are not happy. This is in his responding affidavit, is that simply because you are not happy with the result that has been yielded does not mean that work has not been done. And that is that's a light into the mind of the man, right? So simply because we are not happy with what we see as he consolidates power into his office doesn't mean that he is not achieving what he is setting out to achieve.
Well, I think we must be very, very clear that the president's legal argument is not sound, right? Because he said that I don't have this legal duty But in Mazibuko and in Grootboom, what they actually said is that government does have a duty and they must take reasonable steps to realize the provision of those Section 27 rights. So what has happened in the last 5 years is that those rights which you're supposed to get, if you were getting 75, now you're getting 50. You cannot go to the court and say, you said I should take reasonable time to achieve the thing, and that doesn't give me an obligation. But the reality is you've taken, in that time you were given, the reasonable time where you were supposed to move from 75 to 100, you've moved from 75 to 50. So you can't say, don't make a finding against me, things have gotten worse, because they should make a finding against you because things have gotten worse, because the obligation was not to take out the 75 and give 50. It was to move in reasonable time using the resources of the government to achieve 100%. So his case is predicated on a misunderstanding of what the court said, because in Grootboom and in Mazibuko, the government did win the cases, but it was on the basis of you need to progressively realize, not derogate.
I love this. Pumi, your example, I mean, it's just so, it does give you an insight into how he thinks. In other words, because he's been doing some work, whatever that work is, even though it's resulted in nothing. The fact
because
that
you're unhappy with the work that he's doing doesn't mean he's not working.
He's still been doing the work, So this is just typical, like, nonsense. You can tell that this is someone who's hardly ever been responsible for anything in their lives. That they've kind of. Anyway, look. The thing I want to bring us to is we've got a final result on the poll, and I want to get to that shortly. But I did see that Jamie also had some comments to make on the Nigerian election, which we brought up on last week's Burning Platform. Let it never be said that on this show we don't talk about African things. We absolutely dedicate ourselves to making sure that we shine the correct light on all of the stories from our own continent. But Jamie, you've got some comments on how those elections went. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the result has been announced. There's some challenges. Tinubu, who is part of the incumbent party, has been declared the winner, and people are complaining that there was vote buying, election rigging, all manner of things. But one of the critical questions that exists is that the youth of Nigeria backed a totally different candidate. They didn't back him. They backed Peter Obi, and they're very frustrated with the way things are. And the dynamics in Nigeria are such that right now they are over 21% inflation. They have a currency shortage. They've got over 60% youth unemployment. Sounds very similar to South Africa minus the inflation.
Well, the other thing that's very similar to South Africa, what I saw as the results have been trickling in. I mean, I've been very frustrated looking at what's happening on the ground in Nigeria, is the fact that the Nigerian IEC, I think they call INEC, that only of the 90, we spoke about this last week, that there are 90 million registered voters in Nigeria, but they are reporting that only 23 million people showed up to vote. Very similar to South Africa. What, right? Is that even a valid election?
It's worse even than South Africa, because
is that even a valid election when you have less than a quarter of the people showing up to vote?
It's very bad, and I wish we had more time.
Jamie, that's amazing, because when young people are clearly on one side of an argument and older people on the other, that indicates that there's going to be some kind of dissension in society as a whole. That the young people who are looking to make their futures in a country, if they feel that future is being decided by old people who are going with the same old, not necessarily different way, that's going to lead to some huge ructions in society in Nigeria.
But it's also important that young people must learn that you don't vote on Twitter. You don't vote on Twitter. You vote at the ballot box.
But they did vote. They did vote. I think the challenge that exists in Nigeria is, number one, the dynamics of a national election, because you need over $20 million to be able to run a national election. And these guys, what they do, the godfathers and all of these guys, the guys who benefit from the tenders and the contracts, they basically give out food parcels in the villages and in what we would call townships and the slums. So if you are not able to go and match that, to go with a rice pack, cooking oil, a yam and plantain and all of this stuff, you're basically not going to be as relevant as the guy who comes every week just to maintain that. And there's allegations there that votes are being bought for 2,000 naira and various amounts, because these old guys, the Tinubus and even Atiku, they have been buying elections for a long time. But the real challenge aside of the election is that Nigeria is run by godfathers. Even Tinubu is alleged to have been a godfather. These are the guys who have been governors and then elevated, and they work behind the scenes to secure states for candidates that they prefer in return for favors. So it's very difficult to hold them to account because they're not like officially operating in any capacity, but they're known to be running those particular states to their preferences. That's why you'll find that there's a very affluent community in Nigeria, and most of the country is living in abject poverty, and everyone knows that these godfathers are running the show, but how do you hold them to account? So I think what you see in Lagos, the victory of Peter Obi in Lagos shows that in one of those places, at least the youth were able to prevail. But it's difficult when you come out of the mainland to now of the island to do that in a way that you can replicate across the country, because $20 million is a lot of money, and the youth of Nigeria don't have those kind of logistics. But you're right that it's not just Twitter, but I think, to be fair to them, they did try. It's just like the dynamics are such that it's not as
Jamie, I'm going to have to call this to order. We want to just thank the professor for coming in this morning, Professor Legwaila, who has been so helpful, and we are all paying attention, because thank goodness for the Tax Ombudsman. Otherwise, we would have no recourse against the predations of SARS. But also, I think your message overall is know your rights. And I appreciate you being part of the show this morning.
We even forgot to do an ad that says, how do people get hold of the Tax Ombudsman? Where do they find you? What's your email address? What's the...
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Our contact details are on our website, which is www.taxombud.gov.za. You can get all .gov.za. You can get all the information there. And yeah, no, I also thank you very much for having us here. It was an interesting discussion. Sorry, Jamie, I couldn't comment on any of what you said, but that is purely because I believe in do unto others as they do unto you, because you haven't commented on any of the things that I said.
No, you covered everything. I didn't have. It's very difficult to say things about a person who's operating in an official capacity in a supporting role as an ombuds, because you are a referee. So I can't say much to a referee unless if you had been implicated as the office of the ombuds in something wrong, I would have said, what happened last week or what happened 6 years ago? But the ombuds is the ombud. So I can't, for me, I think the questions that you asked were comprehensive. And you covered it.
Hey,
you explained
guys,
to people.
Jamie is a politician. That is deftly dealt with, Jamie. Well done.
That was very well done. So I'm very upset that none of us got to comment, and we all could have joined in on the discussion around Didi Mabuza leaving. But we're out of time.
But tell us the answer to the. I know we're out of time. Just a few more minutes. Let's look at the answers to the polls.
Okay. So you'll all be devastated to learn that only 4% of our audience think that tax is the fairest way to distribute resources. You'll be equally unhappy to hear that 22% think it is unfair and penalizes certain people. You may be pleased or not to know that the cost of being part of society, 29% of people agree with that tax is the cost of being part of society. But overall, the winning category is that tax is theft. 45% of people. So Edward Kieswetter has a work cut out for him.
Whoa.
But we have on our side the Tax Ombudsman. So if you have a complaint or an issue with SARS and they're not responding to you and they're not doing what you need them to do, then please get hold of the professor and his very good people at the Tax Ombud. They will help you to sort out these problems.
15 days turnaround.
98% success rate, which is very, very impressive. taxombud.gov.za. Thank you, Jamie. Very good to have you on the show as always. Thank you, Professor Legwaila, and thank you to Phumi Mashego. We will see you on Thursday next week for the Burning Platform. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.